The war had lasted for years. The XL-TAC Empire, a ruthless alien race, had pushed humanity to the edge of extinction. Planet after planet fell, human colonies burned, and the great fleets of Earth were shattered in battle. Hope was fading. Now, the last human stronghold, Fort Solace on Earth, was under siege. The final battle. The sky was dark with enemy warships. Massive XL-TAC dreadnoughts hovered over ruined cities, their cannons glowing with deadly energy. Their soldiers, tall and armored, marched through the streets, crushing the last human defenders. General David Rains stood on the balcony of the crumbling command tower, looking at the chaos below. Explosions lit up the night as human resistance fighters made their last stand. He clenched his fists. This was not how it was supposed to end. A voice crackled over the radio. "General, we can't hold them back anymore. They're inside the walls." Rains took a deep breath. "Understood, Sergeant. Fall back to the tunnels." He turned to his officers. Their faces were covered in sweat and dust. Some were wounded, others exhausted. But they all knew what this meant. The war was over. Humanity had lost. A loud explosion shook the ground. The main defense line had collapsed. The XL-TAC were inside the fortress now, slaughtering anyone in their path. The enemy's celebration. High above Earth, inside the enemy's flagship, Warlord Korath watched the battle from his throne. His golden armor gleamed, his red eyes burned with satisfaction. He had waited years for this moment. A XL-TAC officer approached him and saluted. "The humans are finished, my lord. Fort Solace has fallen. Their leaders are either dead or captured." Korath leaned forward, his claws tapping against his throne. "And the survivors? Being executed as we speak." Korath smiled. "Good. Let the galaxy see what happens to those who defy us." The XL-TAC fleet fired one final bombardment, sending waves of fire across the ruins of Earth's last hope. Then silence. The great war between the XL-TAC and humanity was over. The enemy had won, but deep underground, beneath the ruins of Fort Solace, in a secret bunker, a radio signal was sent. It was an ancient message, one that had not been used in centuries. Boom, boom, boom. A deep, slow drumming sound echoed through the tunnels. At first, it was faint, barely noticeable, but then it grew louder. Steady, powerful, unstoppable. In the darkness, survivors opened their eyes. Hidden human forces across the galaxy paused and listened. The war drums had begun, and that meant one thing. Humanity was not finished yet. 2 seconds. You said, "Start with part 2 more unique and lengthy, and give answer in chat, and give answer without title." ChatGPT said. General David Rains sat in the dimly lit bunker, his uniform torn and blood-stained. The air was thick with dust, and the walls trembled as distant explosions rumbled overhead. Around him, a handful of soldiers and civilians sat in silence, their faces hollow with exhaustion and loss. The war was supposed to be over. Humanity was supposed to be gone. But Rains knew better. He reached out and adjusted an old, rusted console. A flickering holographic screen displayed static before slowly forming an image. An AI interface, its glowing blue eyes scanning the room. "Legion online." A mechanical voice echoed through the chamber. "Legion, status report," Rains said, his voice hoarse. The AI paused for a moment before responding. "Human military strength, 0.3% operational. Earth-based resistance, minimal. Probability of long-term survival, 0%. Rains exhaled slowly. "And the sleepers?" The AI's eyes flickered, awaiting activation. A low murmur spread through the room. The sleepers. The hidden fleets. The last hope. Rains straightened. The war was not over. It was just beginning. A soldier stepped forward. A young woman with a deep scar across her cheek. "Sir, do we send the signal?" He didn't hesitate. "Send it." A moment later, The drumming sound filled the bunker again. It wasn't just noise. It was a code, a message, a call to arms. Across the ruins of Earth, survivors stopped what they were doing and listened. Across distant moons and hidden outposts, old resistance cells turned on their radios. Deep in space, forgotten human warships, floating in the void, received the signal. They were all waiting for this moment. Far beyond Earth, in a lawless corner of space, a rusted battleship drifted among the wreckage of a forgotten war. Its engines were cold. Its weapons were silent. Its crew, long thought dead, sat in the dark, waiting. Then the ship's lights flickered on. A voice crackled through the intercom. "Commander, we have received the signal." A tall man, his face lined with scars, opened his eyes. He had once fought for Earth. He had once watched his home burn. Now, after all these years, the drums had called him back. He stood, stretching his stiff muscles. "Prepare the ship. We're going home." Across the galaxy, other ships powered up. Other warriors returned to their stations. The humans who had survived in exile were returning. The XL-TAC had made one fatal mistake. They had left survivors. And now, the war drums had begun to play. The XL-TAC did not fear ghosts. They did not fear whispers in the dark or signals in the void. They had crushed humanity. They had erased them from history. The war was over. The XL-TAC Empire had won. Or so they thought. On the occupied remains of Earth, XL-TAC soldiers patrolled the ruined streets, their armored boots crunching over shattered stone and bones. Fires still burned from the final battle. Human cities had become graveyards, and the surviving population had been enslaved or executed. The XL-TAC officers walked with arrogance, laughing in their strange, guttural voices as they celebrated their victory. And then one of them heard it. Boom. A single deep sound, distant but powerful. Boom. Boom. The officer froze, his mandibles clicking nervously. He turned to his commander. "Do you hear that?" The commander snarled. "Ignore it. Just a storm." But then the sound grew louder. It wasn't a storm. It wasn't an echo of war. It was rhythmic, purposeful, alive. A vibration in the air, a pulse that seemed to come from the very ground beneath them. The commander's eyes narrowed. He tapped his communicator. "Fleet Command, are you detecting any unusual signals?" "Static." Then a voice crackled back. "Unclear, Commander. Some kind of anomaly." And then the explosions began. All across the city, XL-TAC watchtowers erupted in flames. Their weapon caches detonated one by one. Hidden explosives, planted by humans who had been waiting for this moment, turned the occupied zone into a killing ground. The sky, once filled with XL-TAC banners, was now lit with fire. The war drums were not just a sound. They were a signal, a countdown to war. Far beyond Earth, inside the XL-TAC High Command, Warlord Korath stood in his war chamber, watching the chaos unfold on his screens. He had seen many battles, many rebellions, and crushed them all. But this was different. The war was supposed to be over. The humans were supposed to be broken. A XL-TAC strategist rushed in. "My lord, human forces have attacked 3 of our strongholds simultaneously. We are suffering heavy losses." Korath's claws clenched. "How many troops?" The strategist hesitated. "Unknown, my lord. They appear to be appearing out of nowhere." Korath's eyes darkened. Impossible. But the reports kept coming in. Attacks on occupied human colonies, ambushes in deep space, sabotage on XL-TAC supply lines. It was as if humanity had risen from the grave. And then a new report. Korath read it slowly, his claws tightening. "A human fleet has been spotted near the dead world of Titan 7. Ships that were thought destroyed. Ships that should not exist." The war drums grew louder. The impossible was happening. Humanity had returned. And this time, they were not fighting for survival. They were fighting for revenge. The sound of the war drums echoed across the galaxy. It started as a whisper in the void, a low, distant thrum that pulsed through forgotten communication channels. At first, the XL-TAC commanders dismissed it, a meaningless transmission, a relic of a species that no longer existed. But then, the drums grew louder. Every occupied human colony heard them. Every enslaved survivor felt the vibrations in their bones. And something changed. The XL-TAC had won the war by breaking humanity's spirit, by making them believe resistance was hopeless. But now, with every beat of the drums, that illusion began to crack. On the mining world of Vorak 9, human workers, once beaten and hopeless, stopped working. They looked up at the sky, listening to the sound. On the prison planet of Halos Prime, where the XL-TAC kept their most dangerous human captives, a riot broke out. Guards were overwhelmed. Cells were opened. The prisoners armed themselves with whatever they could find. On a distant space station, where human refugees had hidden for years, a commander received a simple message on an old console. Stand. Fight. The war is not over. And then, they heard the drums. They understood. The signal was not just a call to battle. It was a declaration, a promise, a warning. Humanity had returned. The XL-TAC empire was vast, spread across hundreds of worlds. But suddenly, they were under attack everywhere at once. Supply convoys vanished in the dark of space. Communication networks were hacked and destroyed. XL-TAC warships found themselves ambushed in asteroid fields, their crews slaughtered by enemies they couldn't even see. It was chaos. Warlord Korath stood inside his war chamber, watching as his empire burned. He had fought humans for years. He had seen them bleed. He had seen them break. But now he saw something different. The humans that had once fought for survival were now fighting for vengeance. This was no longer a war. It was an uprising, a reckoning. On the newly established XL-TAC capital world, a planet once owned by humans, an important meeting was taking place. The XL-TAC High Command had gathered. Generals, admirals, warlords, all of them nervous. "We must act quickly," one of them growled. "The humans should not have this strength. We crushed them. We burned their worlds." "Then explain why our fleets are disappearing," another shouted. The war drums grew louder. The XL-TAC could hear them even here on their own homeworld. One of the younger officers, his face pale, whispered, "They're everywhere. The humans are everywhere." For the first time in history, the conquerors felt fear. And then the alarms blared. A fleet had just emerged from hyperspace, a human fleet. They had come straight for the capital. This was no longer a resistance. This was a war. The war drums had once been a distant sound, a forgotten echo in the void. Now, they roared across the galaxy. The XL-TAC, once the undisputed rulers of space, were no longer hunters. They were prey. Humanity was striking everywhere at once, their forces appearing like ghosts from the darkness. The XL-TAC fleets, so used to overwhelming their enemies, now found themselves ambushed, outmaneuvered, and outgunned. Warlord Korath watched the battle reports flooding in, his claws digging into the arms of his throne. How was this possible? Humanity had been defeated, their armies scattered, their fleets destroyed. And yet, they were winning. He growled and turned to his generals. "Deploy the Eclipse." A silence fell over the war room. Even the most battle-hardened XL-TAC warriors hesitated at those words. The Eclipse was not a warship. It was a planet killer, a behemoth of destruction designed for one purpose: to erase entire worlds in a single blast. "But my lord," one general began, his mandibles clicking nervously. "Do it." Korath's voice shook the chamber. "Wipe out every last human world. If they refuse to die, we will burn them to ash." The Eclipse emerged from the void, a monstrous warship the size of a moon. Its black hull reflected no light, and its core pulsed with the energy of a dying sun. It drifted above Nova Prime, a hidden human sanctuary world, the last refuge of the resistance. Millions of civilians, refugees, and soldiers looked up at the sky as the shadow of the eclipse blotted out the stars. Aboard the command deck of the resistance fleet, General Rains stood motionless, staring at the monstrous ship. He had known this day would come. A voice crackled over the comms. "General, the eclipse is charging its weapon. We have minutes before it fires. A single blast could shatter the planet, erase it from existence." Rains refused to let that happen. He turned to his crew, his voice steady. "Prepare the fleet. We make our stand here." Across the void, human ships powered up their weapons. Fighters launched, cruisers moved into attack formation, but they all knew the truth. They couldn't destroy the eclipse. It was too big, too powerful. They had only one option. They had to get inside. The battle erupted in the skies above Nova Prime. Human fighters swarmed the eclipse, dodging through its massive defense turrets. Bombers struck at its shields, sending shockwaves across the hull. But the eclipse was unstoppable, its armor absorbing the damage like a beast shaking off raindrops. Then, as planned, a single strike team broke through. A stolen Cell-Tac transport, disguised as an enemy ship, slipped past the defenses. Inside were Rains and his best soldiers. Their mission: get to the core. Disable the eclipse from the inside. The transport slammed into a docking bay. The doors opened, and the human warriors stormed out, guns blazing. Cell-Tac guards fell under precise fire. The humans moved like ghosts, clearing the halls with brutal efficiency. But time was running out. Deep in the eclipse's core, the planet-killer weapon reached full charge. 1 minute to fire. Rains and his team raced through the corridors, fighting their way toward the main reactor. The ship trembled as human forces outside continued their desperate assault. They reached the control room. A squad of Cell-Tac elite warriors stood in their path. A brutal firefight erupted. Blades clashed, guns roared, blood sprayed across the walls. One by one, the humans fell, but they pushed forward. Rains took a deep breath, his side bleeding, his body shaking. The reactor was before him, a pulsing core of unstable energy. 30 seconds. He raised his rifle, aimed at the main conduit, and fired. The reactor exploded in a blinding flash. The eclipse shook violently, alarms screaming across the ship. Fires erupted, metal groaned, power flickered. Rains fell to his knees, breathing heavily. They had done it. The eclipse was falling. Outside, the Cell-Tac fleet watched in horror as their ultimate weapon began to tear itself apart. Inside his command ship, Warlord Korath rose from his throne, his eyes wide with disbelief. This was impossible. The eclipse had been unstoppable, a force of nature, a symbol of Cell-Tac power. And now, it was burning, crashing, destroyed. The war drums boomed like thunder, and for the first time, Korath felt fear in his bones. The humans had done more than survive. They had defied fate itself. The wreckage of the eclipse burned in orbit over Nova Prime, its once mighty form now a shattered husk of metal and fire. Pieces of the warship fell like meteors, crashing into the planet's surface, leaving fiery scars upon the land. The Cell-Tac's ultimate weapon, their symbol of power, was gone. But the war was far from over. General David Rains stood on the ruined bridge of the human flagship, his uniform torn and soaked in blood. His hands trembled as he gripped the edge of the console, watching the debris drift past the viewing window. His team had destroyed the eclipse from the inside, but at a terrible cost. Half his men were dead, and the Cell-Tac were still coming. A frantic voice crackled over the comms. "General, we have incoming enemy fleets, multiple dreadnoughts. They're not retreating. They're preparing for a full-scale invasion." Rains clenched his jaw. The eclipse was gone, but the Cell-Tac Empire was far from beaten. They wanted revenge. On the XL-TAC capital world, Warlord Korath stood before a massive holographic war map, his rage barely contained. His claws dug into the steel table, his eyes burning with fury as he watched the reports come in. Humanity was winning. That was impossible. His empire had ruled for centuries. It had crushed civilizations, burned planets, and rewritten history itself. No species had ever defied the XL-TAC and survived. Yet here was humanity, a species that should have been wiped from existence, destroying his fleets, turning his empire to ash. A XL-TAC strategist stepped forward hesitantly. "My lord, our forces are requesting reinforcements. We have lost 3 sectors in the last week. Human warships are appearing in places they should not be." "Then send more troops," Korath snarled. The strategist hesitated. "We have, my lord." And yet, the humans always seem to be one step ahead. They are hitting supply lines, attacking from the shadows. We are losing. A cold silence filled the war chamber. The words had never been spoken before. We are losing. Korath's mandibles twitched in fury. No, this was not possible. He turned toward the star map, his eyes narrowing. Then we will burn them out. He pointed to Earth, the ruined homeworld of humanity. Destroy it. Wipe out every last survivor. Make an example of them. If the humans still had hope, he would tear it from them. Back on Earth, hidden deep underground, a group of survivors gathered in a darkened war chamber. The old command center, long abandoned after the fall, had come back to life. Screens flickered, maps were drawn, and voices whispered with urgency. This was humanity's final move. A young officer turned to Rains, her face pale. "Sir, enemy dreadnoughts have entered the Sol system. They are coming for Earth." The room fell silent. They had expected this. The XL-TAC had underestimated them for too long. Now the enemy was desperate, bringing their full might down on the last remnants of humanity. But Rains wasn't afraid. He had waited years for this moment. He turned to his team, his voice steady. "Then it's time. Activate the Iron Fangs." Gasps spread through the room. The Iron Fangs, a fleet fought lost, hidden deep in the asteroid fields of the Sol system, waiting for the right moment to strike. The last, most powerful human warships ever built. The officer nodded, pressing a sequence of codes into the console. Far beyond Earth, in the dark corners of space, something awakened. Beneath the icy surface of Titan, hidden warships powered up their reactors. In the asteroid fields near Jupiter, long dormant cannons came online. Deep beneath the ruins of Mars, launch bays opened, releasing warships into the void. Ships with weapons powerful enough to shatter dreadnoughts. The XL-TAC thought they were coming to wipe out the last humans. Instead, they were walking into a trap. As the enemy fleet approached Earth, Warlord Korath stood on the bridge of his massive command ship, staring at the blue planet below. He would finish this war himself. He raised a clawed hand. "Begin the bombardment." But before his fleet could fire, alarms screamed across the ship. "My lord." Unknown contacts appearing all around us. Korath's eyes narrowed. "What?" And then, from the darkness of space, they emerged. Human warships, massive and armed to the teeth, surged out from hidden locations, from behind moons, from the asteroid fields, from the depths of Titan's icy oceans. And they opened fire. The trap had been sprung. The XL-TAC had come to destroy humanity's last hope. Instead, they had marched straight into their own doom. The war drums boomed across the battlefield, their rhythm shaking the void. This was no longer a rebellion. This was the final battle. The void above Earth had become a battlefield of fire and death. The XL-TAC dreadnoughts, massive and unstoppable, advanced with the arrogance of conquerors. They had come to end humanity once and for all. But instead of a broken species, they found a storm of vengeance waiting for them. From the darkness of space, human warships surged forward, their weapons blazing. These were not old, battered vessels. They were the Iron Fangs, hidden fleets that had waited for the perfect moment to strike. And now they struck with absolute fury. On the bridge of the HFY command ship, Warlord Korath stood frozen, his eyes locked on the chaos unfolding before him. His mighty fleet, the greatest armada the HFY had ever assembled, was being ripped apart. Human battleships, thought to be long destroyed, weaved between the dreadnoughts, bombarding their hulls with pulse cannons and railguns. Fighter squadrons zipped through the battlefield, dodging enemy fire, launching torpedoes that tore through the alien warships like paper. Korath clenched his claws. How? How was this happening? "My lord, we're taking critical losses," a HFY officer cried out. "Our defenses are failing." Korath bared his fangs. "Then fight harder. Obliterate them." But even as he gave the order, his fleet was falling apart. One of his largest dreadnoughts, the Maw of Vengeance, took a direct hit from a human capital ship, its core detonating in a chain reaction that sent fire and debris spiraling into space. The war drums echoed through every open comm channel, a taunting beat that grew louder with every HFY defeat. On Earth's surface, in the ruins of the old cities, survivors looked to the sky. They had lived in darkness for years, hiding under alien rule, fearing every sunrise. Now, they watched as the sky burned, but not with destruction, with hope. They saw HFY warships falling, explosions ripping through the enemy fleet. They heard the war drums and knew humanity was fighting back, and they were winning. Across the broken world, survivors rose from the ashes. Prisoners overpowered their captors. Rebels armed themselves and stormed enemy strongholds. The war was no longer being fought only in space. It was being fought on every occupied world, in every ruined city, in every dark corner where humans still breathed. And they were taking their planet back. Aboard the flagship of the Iron Fangs, General David Rains stood firm. His face was bloodied, his armor cracked, but his eyes were burning with unstoppable determination. "Focus fire on Korath's command ship," he ordered. "End this war." The human fleet unleashed hell, targeting the HFY warlord's flagship. The mighty alien vessel shook under the onslaught, its shields failing, its hull splitting apart. Korath roared in fury, watching as his empire's might crumbled around him. This was not how it was supposed to be. The humans were supposed to be weak. The humans were supposed to be broken. Instead, they had become nightmares. A voice crackled through his ship's failing comms. "Rains. Korath." The human general's voice was calm, cold, final. "You lost." And then the final blow landed. A railgun round the size of a skyscraper slammed into Korath's command ship. The vessel buckled, its core rupturing. The last thing Korath saw before his ship was engulfed in fire was Earth, shining below him. The planet he had thought was dead. The people he had believed were extinct. And as the war drums pounded one last time, he understood. Humanity was never defeated. They had only been waiting for the right moment to strike. The war was over. The last of the HFY forces surrendered or were hunted down. Across the galaxy, human prisoners were freed. Occupied worlds rose in rebellion, driving the aliens from their lands. Earth, ruined, scared, but still standing, was reclaimed. And at the heart of it all, standing amidst the wreckage, General David Rains watched the sunrise over his homeworld. The battle was won. But humanity's story was far from over. They had been conquered once. They would never be conquered again.